Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association's first ever digital event with Mayor Kennedy Stewart. I'm Luca Citon, chair of the DVBIA. I'm also the managing director and a business lawyer here at Boughton Law. We're a law firm based in the downtown core. So thank you for joining us today for this presentation from Mayor Stewart, which will be followed by a Q&A session that will be comprised of questions that we collected from you, our members, in advance of this session using the online platform Slido. It really didn't surprise us at all to see that so many of you responded to our request by submitting very informed questions. This has always been a very engaged group, so thank you for that. Our hope is that by having these questions submitted in advance, that we will have had a chance to identify your top concerns and thereby allow for a more deeper and meaningful dialogue about them here today without any interruption. So we also hope that this format will let you focus on the discussion at hand without the distractions of a chat box or any Q&A pop-ups. And I will say that's probably mostly for my benefit because it is distracting to read those when you're trying to hold a session like this. But in any case, we will do our best to cover as many of your most pressing questions as possible in the time we have with Mayor Stewart today. So before I introduce Mayor Stewart, I would like to welcome some special guests who are joining us online today. Councillor Christine Boyle, Councillor Jean Swanson, Councillor Melissa DeGeneva, Councillor Michael Wiebe, Councillor Lisa Dominato, Councillor Pete Fry, and Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young. Thank you for being with us here today, councillors. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's very special guest presenter, Mayor Kennedy Stewart. As many of you know, Mayor Stewart was sworn into office on November 5th, 2018. We had had the pleasure of hosting a luncheon with Mayor Stewart in 2019 when he was about 3 months into his term. And at the time, he introduced many of his top priorities and areas of focus and fielded your most pertinent questions. 2 years later now, we're happy to have him with us again, taking time out of his day to talk about the issues that matter to you, our downtown business community. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mayor Kennedy Stewart to the virtual stage. And clap if I could.
Thanks very much, Luca. I'm just going to welcome everybody, and thanks very much for having me here today. I'm just going to share my screen now because I have a presentation. And if you'll just let me know if you can see this, that would be helpful.
That works.
That works. Great. Okay. So thanks everyone for having me here today. I'd like to acknowledge we're on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, and really want to thank them for their generosity to all who live, work, and play on their lands. As Luca mentioned, DVBIA luncheon was one of my first major speeches following my election, and so I'm really thrilled to be back here today, even if it's virtually. So soon we'll be able to meet in person again, I'm sure. I've really enjoyed working with the DVBIA, admire your approach to addressing complex issues in the city. And if there's one word that I would use to summarize how I think about the organization, it's thoughtful. I think that we're a global city with a busy downtown core. And I think really that you're thinking about the issues that are facing us, the challenges and the opportunities. It's been very thoughtful and very welcome. So thank you so much for all that work and how you do it. So much has really changed since last time I provided an update to the DVBIA. This week, for example, marks a difficult milestone. It was a year ago this week that the first confirmed case of COVID-19 was reported in Canada. And this has led to all kinds of challenges. I'll touch on a few in this speech, but won't dwell on that. As I'll outline, I have a tremendous amount of optimism about our city's downtown and its continued role as the economic and cultural driver of our province, and wanted to share reasons for my optimism and things that we're doing as a council moving forward. Also like to, of course, acknowledge the councillors that have joined us here today for all the hard work they're doing in our city, as well as our fantastic staff. Okay, so in many ways, the downtown has been ground zero for COVID-19 in terms of its impacts in British Columbia. Not really in terms of case counts, although we're very aware of St. Paul's Hospital being a hub for treatment, but in terms of raw economic and social impacts. And really just want to say thank you so much to the businesses downtown that have been dealing with just, I hate the word unprecedented, but I don't know how else to describe this. It has really been the biggest challenge to our city in recent, if not any year. And the way the businesses have been coping and adjusting have just been amazing, and very sympathetic to the stresses this is putting everybody under. When we think back to last year, it wasn't really until St. Patrick's Day that it became clear to me how the global pandemic would present a challenge greater than any we'd ever faced in the history of the city. We started to get reports from Canada, but at that point, I was having really weekly calls with mayors from around the world who were facing impacts, just horrifying impacts, and I was getting very nervous about how our city would be impacted. So what really brought this to a head was thinking about St. Patrick's Day on March 17th, especially if you think about the throngs of people that were downtown. And again, at that point, we didn't know a lot about the virus, how it was transmitted, how to stop it. So very, very stressful with the thought of people from all over the region converging downtown. So for me, I knew this was a risk we just couldn't take. And I began working the day before, or over the weekend of the day before, with to urge our local and provincial health authorities to shut down bars and restaurants. So on the phone with Minister Adrian Dix and Patricia Daly, Dr. Patricia Daly, the Chief Medical Health Officer here in the city. We know that the actions that we took that week with no blueprint, no script, were really had a profound impact, not just on our city, but on the province-wide response. And just want to quote you an excerpt from Dr. Bonnie Hendry's latest book. Quote, on that Tuesday, March 17th, rumors of planned St. Patrick's Day parties in Vancouver that would attract large crowds in restaurants and pubs were causing concern. As the minister and I headed to our media briefing in Victoria that afternoon, I knew that the local medical health officer in Vancouver, with the support of the city, would pass an order closing bars altogether. Now was clearly the time for me to declare a public health emergency. And it kind of gives me slight shivers thinking about the stress at that time, and then, but also a great amount of pride in terms of how our city has reacted to the COVID challenge. So I want to talk about the connection between COVID, the COVID shutdowns, and social impacts that we're seeing today. You who are on this call and members of the DVBIA will know more than most and understand that the challenges on our streets and in our public spaces didn't come from nowhere. They're almost entirely a direct result of COVID-19. I have a picture of an SRO here, a famous one. We've got a ban on guests in single room occupancy hotels. We have a huge reduction in shelter spaces due to physical distancing policies. And this is pushing a huge number of precariously housed residents out into the streets. It's, I thought, wow, this is just happening in Vancouver. I have a Friday morning meeting at 7 o'clock every Friday morning with the mayors of the 13 largest cities in British Columbia. We're finding it's happening all over the province, all over the country. Montreal's just opened a massive number of emergency shelters. It's happening everywhere. So this, the policies to address COVID are having a big impact on our street life. We also have fewer open public spaces like community centers and libraries. Nonprofits have shut day programs, and that's meant all kinds of services have just been withdrawn for example, fewer public washrooms. Border closures have increased the toxicity of our street drug supply, combined with more people using alone during the COVID. We've seen a record spike in overdoses, which you see in the streets, and it's just heartbreaking. And I'm going to talk more about that in a bit. All these factors combine to create the situations we see on our streets, particularly downtown. So it's very easy for one small thing to tip someone over when they're living on the edge. COVID is just not one small thing, it's been a tsunami. And so it's going to take a lot of hard work. We've all been putting it in and time to get people back on their street, back on their feet, and get the streets kind of back to normal. But really, it's going to take the end of the pandemic for this to happen. And that's why we all just have to stick together, do what we're doing, and just hold on until we can get these vaccines distributed. And I thank you for your efforts to date. So now I'm going to move to some why I'm feeling optimistic about Vancouver, and especially downtown Vancouver. I want to talk about where we're going and what this year and next years are going to look like. So here are data from October 2020 from the Vancouver Economic Commission that forecasts our GDP growth, tracks it, but then projects it into 2021. And you can see that Vancouver is usually in very good shape in terms of GDP growth. This is, you can see that in Metro, we're, often leading the country, if not the province and the country, with very high levels of growth, sometimes as high as close to 5%. But you can see that in 2020, it has just been a massive hit, close to 7% decline in GDP growth, which has just been horrible for those in the private sector in terms of earnings. You can see, however, that the Conference Board of Canada, this is custom-made data that the VEC commissioned, you can see how the indicators that they're measuring show that we're going to have a big rebound this year, with both leading the province and the country in terms of GDP growth, really erasing all our losses and kind of getting us back on our feet in 2021. So those projections are very optimistic, and they're worth repeating, or they should make us optimistic, because they come from reliable sources, and this is data-driven projections. And these numbers are starting to bear out in our unemployment rates. You can see here, our unemployment rate in Vancouver is usually, Metro Vancouver is usually around 4%. You can see that as the pandemic hit, this is a catastrophic collapse of employment, where we were at 14% unemployment through the summer. And then you can see this kind of decline in unemployment as basically the market starts to adjust. The workforce and the market starts to adjust, and people are finding, if they're not returning to their regular jobs, they're finding new jobs to go to. So this really corresponds with what the Conference Board of Canada is saying is an economic recovery. And you can see right now we're just at about 7% unemployment in Metro Vancouver, which is still high, but the trend is going in the right direction. And when you compare it to the other major centers in the country, you can see that Montreal had a much more devastating spring of last year, but has done pretty well in terms of recovery. But Toronto, at 10% unemployment, it's still very worrying for the economy, the national economy. So I think that these are important numbers that probably reflect what you're feeling yourselves. But the other thing to keep in mind is this is kind of the global overall economic numbers within our region. It doesn't reflect how this is impacting individual businesses or different income sectors. So we do know that some people are doing much better than others in terms of how the recovery is rolling out, and we always have to keep that in mind. Contrary to reports, downtown Vancouver is not dead. I've got two important pictures here. One on the right is Amazon's much anticipated Vancouver headquarters at the Post, which is a transformation of that large building. Amazon is going to put 6,000 jobs in the Post in the coming years, and so this is just really one of these indicators of a large tech boom that Vancouver needs to look forward to. So Amazon is doubling down on our local economy, and this highlights the strength of our tech sector and shows that Vancouver is where companies want to establish themselves and grow. An advantage of being mayor is that I meet with a lot of CEOs from major companies, and believe me, there is a strong interest in investing mostly in downtown Vancouver. On the left side, we have a potential redevelopment of Granville Street, which also shows, regardless of council that approves this or doesn't approve it, it also shows that this is where Vancouver, downtown Vancouver, is where people want to be. And this is, where huge capital investments are being directed is downtown. So there's a lot of proposals on the books for downtown Vancouver, a lot of exciting things for council to decide as they come through our chambers. The other thing that's important to note is that a report from Colliers shows that people are getting tired of working from home and away from colleagues. So the Colliers a Q4 2020 report shows that working from home has led to nearly a 25% decrease in productivity. I know there was everybody knows there was kind of an increase at the beginning when people were working from home, but that has declined. Colliers also notes that the downtown has been the hardest hit, but despite this demand, despite of course, the office vacancy, for example, or emptiness, demand for space remains strong, and that's reflected in the nearly 4 million square feet of office space that's under construction just in the downtown core, which is 2/3 of all the office space in the region. So again, global capital tends to look further ahead than day by day or month by month, and they're looking at Vancouver. The thing to remember is that Vancouver is a global city. All global cities have been hit by this pandemic, some harder than others. So that kind of changes the ground for everybody equally. So we are a global city and we have great fundamentals. We have smart, talented people and the most diversified urban economy in the country. So while we have to all struggle through this short-term decline during the pandemic, the economy is going to come back, and it's going to come back stronger, in my view. Despite this future, and we need to do stuff now. We know that, for example, restaurants in the downtown core have been hit very, very hard. And that's why we need to take immediate action. And that's why I'm so happy to work with DoorDash alongside with the DVBIA and the BC Restaurant Association to help launch a Vancouver grants program worth over $1 million to help offset pandemic-related costs. This program launches today, and grants will be awarded by March 1st. And this is just one of many ways that we're trying to work to help those industries that are hardest hit. One of the other things that's really going to help is the 20% increase to the liquor primary capacity. We passed through a special council meeting I called to help level the playing field with neighboring municipalities. I think that's a long time coming. Outside the core, we're also moving to increase job spaces. So in Mount Pleasant, you'll see changes where we're approving stacked offices on top of light industrial land. Enterprises, we have neighborhood grocery stores along with housing allowed on top. Those changes have been recently made. We've approved 800,000 net new artist spaces, which is a big job and cultural driver. We've recently changed downtown east side storefront rules, which will lead to fewer vacant buildings along Hastings Street. So a lot of activity on council that should have immediate impacts in terms of helping those industries that are being hardest hit. So I'm going to now move to the other public health emergency that we're all aware of, and this is overdose deaths. These are very alarming figures. As of November 20th, we've lost 1,288 lives in 2020 due to a toxic drug supply through overdose deaths, and that's a 35% increase over 2019. And that's not even including the December figures. So when these numbers do come out, there's a little question that 2020 will show this has been the worst death toll ever from poison drugs, and that's over the 4 years of this has been declared a public health emergency. I really want to thank the DVBIA for supporting the new OPS in the downtown. I know that was very controversial, but the support was critical, and it will lead to lives being saved. And I think the DVBIA, more than anyone, knows the connection between drugs and street disorder and crime. And that's why I've been working so hard to get decriminalization and safe supply. We need to approach this as a public health emergency. It is a public health emergency. It's not a criminal justice issue, and we're not going to arrest our way out of a health crisis. So we still have to get on track with this. And I do have some important news to share with you here. Is that I'm excited that we've just received word this week from the Minister of Health, Patty Haydu, that Ottawa has agreed to begin formal discussions on Vancouver's plan to decriminalize the simple possession of all illicit drugs. So the only way we can have innovation in our healthcare system, especially when it comes to those who are most vulnerable, is when cities lead the way and push the province and the feds to take action. And of course, we can't lead the way without the support of our community. And I just want to thank you so much for all your support in leading this innovation on healthcare. It's starting to pay dividends. So in addition to decriminalization, safe supply is also needed. Of course, those provisions have been put in place, but it's not coming fast enough. So we'll definitely need your continued help with this. We need to approach safe supply, in my view, with the same ferocity that we've approached COVID-19 and the vaccine rollout. We need targets and timelines, because every person we connect with safe supply is one more person that won't need to steal to survive. And the other thing is just the dignity that's connected with what's going on in our city. Going hand in hand with actions on overdoses are other policies that help maintain a basic level of human dignity. And one of them is the level of social assistance the province provides. Just a couple of weeks ago, you may have seen a unanimous push by council on welfare rates through an op-ed in the province. This was signed by all of council, but it was an initiative by councillors Boyle and Swanson. I wanted to thank them for this. Really, we really need help with the poverty levels in the city, and this would go a long way. In terms of, say, on the ground nuts and bolts stuff, we know there's been a scarcity of washrooms in the city. So we currently have 3 washroom trailers that have been put out. We have portable washrooms, porta potties across the city, but there's more coming soon, and it can't be soon enough in terms of how the downtown's being affected. So I'm going to move to housing now. This was the main thing I ran on in the 2018 election, and I just wanted to walk you through what the success we've had to date. Really already secured almost $500 million for housing from the federal and provincial governments. And just walking through this list, in 2019, we got our first kind of installment from the feds to various projects, $184 million to deepen affordability for working and middle-class families, $165 million from Victoria and Ottawa for 450 modular homes, $92 million from Victoria to purchase hotels. For the first time ever, Ottawa has given money directly to municipalities. So we secure for housing, social housing. So we've secured $51.5 million from Ottawa through their rapid housing initiative. And in addition, council backed my call to allocate $30 million for hotel leases and purchases. Much more to do. For example, I'm really proud that council unanimously supported the staff plan to pursue $1 billion in funding to renovate and shift 105 SRO private hotel buildings to the nonprofit sector. And money is one thing, but projects are another. Libby Davies always reminds me of this. So you are going to start seeing movement. For example, 58 West Hastings there's going to be groundbreaking this spring, which the city has been intimately involved in. That will make a difference. You will start seeing movements on the Regent and Balmoral hotels since they've been secured now, and we have a great partner in the province. So if you think about how that's going to transform that block, it is very exciting. So let's look at our housing stats. These are, we have targets set on housing, and you can see that we're doing pretty well on them, at least in 2020. Even during the pandemic, when we lost public hearing time and our staff were under tremendous pressure, as was council, doing everything virtually, we surpassed our targets for both social and housing approvals, purpose-built rental housing approvals. So you can see you can see on this graph that we're not just meeting, but we're exceeding our approval targets, which is, I think, a credit to the hard work of staff, of course, the proponents of these projects, our partners, the federal and provincial governments, BC Housing, nonprofits, as well as council, putting the time in to get these approvals passed. Still more big decisions to make, though, for council. You know, I saw the other day that the East Van home prices are reaching $2 million. There's really no way we can have a sustainable city if the vast majority of households are frozen out of the most residential areas of our city. So that's why we need to see my Making Home proposal come back quickly so we can turn large, expensive, detached homes into multiple units that include homes for that are permanently set aside for middle-class families. So I'm hoping we can get that back to council for a decision. Again, this is a pilot project that would lead our way forward, where other cities in the United States, Portland, Sacramento, are moving ahead much faster with these type of proposals. We need to catch up. Council has also directed staff to come back with proposed changes that could build thousands of new rental homes in the transition areas close to arterials, with small apartment buildings, the kind of buildings that used to be very common all over our city. Staff are also studying how pre-zoning certain areas of our city for social housing could shave years off the approval process and could save a lot of money if implemented. So all of these ideas, all these things that will come in front of council are aimed at helping the workforce live and thrive in Vancouver. And these are your workers. These are people that, if they can't find places to live in Vancouver, have to commute long distances to get to work, which is a big impact on their lives and on, frankly, the productivity of business. So, and in fact, we know that these homes are also for business owners. Perhaps those that are going to be renting, and then trying to find vehicles by which people can afford to buy and build equity would be great too. So stay tuned for these as they come to council. Going to run through a couple of quick hits for you, just to update you on a couple of areas. On childcare, we signed a $33 million memorandum with the province in 2019 that would bring 2,300 new childcare spaces to Vancouver that are all eligible for the $10 a day program. In the first half of 2021, we're on track to open almost 300 new spaces, and we're really excited about how this MOU is working. In terms of the city manager search, as you know, Sadhu Johnston has left the city, and we are, Paul Mulcahy is the interim city manager. This is a very high-profile job, and thanks to Paul for stepping in as we launch our search, undertake our search. I can tell you we've received a lot of interest from around the world on this, so as you would think you would, because this is one of the most important civil service jobs in Canada. It's so important that we get this right, and I know council is committed to having a very thorough search, and I have great confidence that we'll be hiring somebody this year that will help us move the city ahead. I want to acknowledge the provincial government. Of course, there's been an election since I spoke to you last, and I think we're in very good place with our provincial relationship. Had very in-depth conversations with Minister Eby, who has now taken over the housing file, Minister Farnworth when it comes to public safety, and Minister Malcolmson when it comes to mental health and addiction. We are having, of course, discussions with all relevant ministers, which I feel that are really good and very optimistic about how they're going to help us tackle our toughest problems here in the city. I did also want to talk about mobility pricing. I know this has been a very thorny issue, and I can understand that. And I think it's our fault for not being more clear on perhaps there's a little bit too much enthusiasm around what this all means. So I want you to be clear that right now what we're undertaking on mobility pricing is just a study. I'm a fact-based, kind of evidence-based, that's how I look at making policy decisions. And right now I just don't have enough information about what mobility pricing would look like. And so that's why I'm supportive of more study, but just that. I know that many businesses are worried about this, and I really don't want to add to your stress. So I'm telling you right now that as far as I'm concerned, now is not the right time to bring in anything on this. And if we were going to move on mobility pricing, we would have much broader public support in order for this to happen. So I want you to rest assured that what I'm focused on is getting through COVID-19, moving ahead with our recovery, and then making sure that our housing market is accessible to more people. So I'm just coming to the end of my presentation, but I have to pull a picture of this guy up before I close. I just wanted to thank Charles Gauthier so much for what he's contributed to your organization and our city. During his 29 years of service to the DVBIA, Charles has been involved in a large public scale consultation of reimagining a downtown Vancouver, which it was so essential to what things look like now and will in the future. And also, of course, he's got such a long list of accomplishments, it's hard to list them all. But, really many initiatives to keep the downtown core vibrant throughout the years. And personally, I would like to thank him for his support of safe supply as the only way forward here in the city. So his leadership has been unparalleled, and I know I'm speaking for all of council that we're sad that he's moving on, but of course, a tip of the hat to Charles for everything he's done for the city. So I want to thank you so much for allowing me to speak here today, and now I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mayor Stewart. Maybe we can, there we go, perfect. I was just going to say that. That was very informative. I like saying that whenever the subject of Charles' departure comes up, that it reiterate had nothing to do with my taking over as chair, because they did seem very timely, but absolutely no connection. So moving off from that. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let's move into our Q&A, and thank you to so many of you, our members who submitted your questions. We did notice several similar questions come up, which speaks to the importance of those topics. So don't be surprised then if you hear your question with a little different wording, because we did have to review a number of them. We'll try to make through as many as possible, considering we are closing this discussion at the top of the hour. But let's start now with one of the most shared concerns, and for myself included, I live and work downtown. We received a number of questions that had the common theme of community safety. Safety has consistently been an issue shared by our membership, and the pandemic has really exacerbated this concern for many of our businesses, particularly those at street level retail. The question, I guess, is how are you addressing these pervasive issues? And in answering, our members were hoping that you could speak about policing, as well as issues around mental health and supporting our vulnerable communities.
Right, thanks so much for the question. So as I've said in my speech, the impacts of COVID have been very widespread, and they've really changed the nature of how our city operates. And we discussed this at the Vancouver Police Board and others, is just the massive impact this has had. And you can see this in the crime statistics of how the nature of crime in the city has changed. The one thing that I also know is, of course, we're not going to arrest our way out of COVID-19. So I think that's why the focus has been on providing more services for those who are in most need in terms of housing and other support. In terms of policing, though, I think what COVID is exposed is that, the weakness of our social safety net, and perhaps about how a number of our tools are a bit outdated. So in the spring of last year, I called for a review of the Police Act, which governs how we police ourselves here in the city. The Minister of Public Safety took up that call, and now I think this is probably one of the most important things that the provincial government is looking at right now. There is an all-party committee that's been struck, is taking submissions with recommendations coming forward in October. So I think that the lessons learned from COVID need to be incorporated into this. I am talking to people across the city, across the country, everybody about what they're thinking we should do here and what should our submissions look like to the province. So in the immediate short term, it's getting up housing to get folks off the street, getting in safe supply, and those will have definite impacts on crime rates. Again, I'm very, very sympathetic to businesses that have really borne the brunt of the changes in our street life here, and it is a topic that has grips council, putting more money into sanitation services. And again, we have a great chief in Adam Palmer, who has been redistributing police resources in order to tackle the toughest problems. And we've seen some impact. The latest stats that I've seen, we've seen some decline, which is welcome news in terms of criminal activity in the city. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Segueing very easily from that in a similar vein, our members are also often in touch with us around issues about the cleanliness near their business. They're aware of 311 and the opportunity there, and they do often report their issues through that system. But sometimes we're told that they feel as though their concerns aren't being prioritized. Has there been any conversations at the city level about the effectiveness of responses to 311 calls in regard to that area of cleanliness?
Yeah, okay. So 311 is kind of a mystery to me when I took this job, and then I went up to the city manager's office one day, Sadie Johnson at that point, and what I saw in his office was that he has a monitor, a real-time monitor of 311 calls that is a very important innovation because it allows the city management to shift resources and staff time around as the nature of the calls change. So you can see these lines going across the screen that say the nature of the calls that are coming in, which is I think a really good way to track the way things are going. And then of course, when COVID hit, we had a total change in what services were being demanded. So council has responded by increasing, for example, the amount of money put forward for street cleaning and sanitation. Even in a tough budget time, council found a way to get money to deliver more services through 311. I do agree that we have to constantly review our mechanisms to make sure that they're responding in the right way. But also need to keep in mind that COVID, I was just talking with you earlier about how I went to City Hall yesterday to work in my office for a few hours, and essentially it was empty because folks are physically distancing, and that impacts all our services. So, and then there's really been an overwhelming demand as we know the growth of street homelessness. So again, good on council for putting more money into this, but I expect things to turn. It is a lot of it's to do with the pandemic impacts.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Being that we are the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association, we did also get a lot of questions about small businesses, and as you've obviously mentioned, this year has been considerably difficult for the small businesses in the downtown core, and you have touched on this a little bit. But are there any plans or grant programs that you haven't yet mentioned already that you think will help these struggling small businesses survive the next few months and years?
Yeah, so I already mentioned the DoorDash program, which is, it's not a ton of money, but it's a great initiative, and it's great that it's from a private sector company, so that takes burden off the taxpayers, which is, we're in tough times with that these days. What I'm looking into is perhaps another tax deferral for this year. I want to see what would be the impacts on the city budget and make that information available to councillors, of course, and to have that as part of our budget discussion. I think that was helpful last year. That's the reports I've heard. So that would be one way that we could help, is to extend the tax payment date. But I'd like to know if that's something that you think would help. So if your members would like to let us know, the feedback would be great as we make budget choices for this year. The other thing, of course, is I do talk to federal ministers very often, and the best thing I can do with other mayors in some ways is to continue these federal programs. They're continually adjusting them. They're making choices as well. And so just to make sure that those programs become more effective and don't stop. I mean, I think that's the key. That would be, I think, a terrible blow if the feds kind of stop their programs. And so being your lobbyist in chief on that one, I'm happy to continue doing that.
Yeah, we can definitely circle back with more information on the tax shift. I mean, I think that'll be a great support. Again, a number of these things were items you touched on, but we're going into a bit more detail, this time on arts and culture. And so we also received some questions on that subject, and largely were around the fact of how do you plan on supporting the arts in our city, specifically in relation to programs and activations that will help encourage people to come downtown, which is really the big issue.
Yeah, I mean, my brother is a performing artist, plays street punk. He plays it in Vancouver, but all around the world. And this COVID has been so devastating to artists of all types. So I've been talking with my brother about how they've been trying to generate revenue for artists. And it's been really tough. And that means there's when people aren't playing sports or acting or live music, when your downtown core is built around that, it's going to have a massive negative impact. So I mean, working with the other levels of government to provide income support is essential. I think that we've with our own grants to arts and culture last year, there's conditions on these grants. The council decided to pull the conditions off and just let folks use the money where they needed to, mostly to stay alive. And we've done the same this year, and we've continued with our grants. So that's good. We've also approved a plan to allow 800,000 square feet of new space over the next 10 years. So that should increase the amount of arts and culture space within the city, which would lead to a much more vibrant city and more spaces for artists to make money, which is important. And we want to hear from you folks about what steps should we take, beyond these things. I think the worst type of government program is like an uninformed one, because it pulls money from some areas unnecessarily and then puts it in areas where it's not working. So that's kind of a broad overview of what we got. But again, specific things would be helpful, full well knowing that, it was a really tough budget year for us last year. So a lot of hard choices for council. And I think this year is going to be similar.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And we also had a question, and again, it's something you touched on, but it did cause a bit of an uproar with our members. So I want to get a bit more granular in it. And this is probably your favorite subject these days, is mobility pricing. So understanding what you said and that it is early days, it is an issue that our members have really circled back on a number of times with us. So I guess the more granular question we have is, under what circumstances would you support transport pricing going ahead with Vancouver going it alone, rather than being part of a regional approach, which seems to be what people would prefer to see?
Yeah, I mean, so back when I was an MP, I was actually part of the conversation about mobility pricing in the region. That whole commission, I participated in that and studied it a lot. So I understand kind of what the regional approach looks like. And there's been a lot of good information about that. What there hasn't been a lot of information on is other models. So I'm happy to get that information and glad that staff's doing it, which includes a public input. But then we just have to see, well, what problem are we trying to fix here? What are the best options for fixing this problem? And is this one option that would be worth considering? If, and there's a lot of stop points for that all the way along. There could be no, at any point, it could be a no, we can't do this legally, which is my understanding, but that may change. You know, if people find different models, it may be that, you know, the province decides that they want to put mobility pricing in Metro, which may change things. But I think, you know, more information is always better. And that's, in my mind, that's where we're getting to. Get all the information out there, share it publicly, have a big discussion. On the other side of it, if the residents of Vancouver say, you know, with a very loud voice, we want this to happen, I think as mayor, that's something also for me to listen to. And I frankly haven't heard that. So, you know, I was studying in London when they brought in the congestion charge there, and that was a pretty rough landing for that. So I think also talking to people in other cities about the pros and cons of that are important, and something I'm engaged in too. So at this point, I'm on the, I want more information so I can have better dialogue with folks. But the regional pricing model also has its disadvantages for us. So again, weighing all that information is where I'm at. So I can tell you, it's nothing from my perspective. I mean, I am only one vote on council on these types of things, but for me, there's no need to rush into snap decisions or even larger explorations, especially in the middle of COVID. Like it's too much stress. So I'm okay with studies, but beyond that, I'm not okay.
Yeah, I think the timing was something that had a great impact on people. And
I'd like to apologize for that. I mean, I think sometimes when, you know, a city is churning through things that, you know, you always have to be sensitive to how these are impacting folks and their stress levels. And I think we missed the mark on that one, to tell you the truth.
Appreciate that. Okay, circling back to, again, the core mandate of being the downtown Vancouver BIA. And again, I apologize for having, you know, you did touch on some of these, but we're getting a bit more specific. We did receive a question about more general support for the core, the downtown core, and not just related to what we've talked about of arts and culture. We've seen that downtown centers throughout the world, and I think you mentioned this as well, they've been hit particularly hard by the pandemic. Harder than suburban areas in some cases, and simply as a result of the loss of employees who've been working from home for a better part of the year. Do you have any other plans other than what you've mentioned already to help bolster downtowns, particularly downtowns, economic recovery in the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, making sure it's at the forefront of our plans is always the key. I mean, for me, really, downtown Vancouver is not the core of Metro. It's the core of British Columbia. It is where you know, it's the most exciting place. As far, I'm a cities guy, so I love downtown cores. And what has been happening, what's never lost on me is that downtown Vancouver is a capital investment magnet. I mean, it is where, so the stuff we've been approving at council, whether it's new office towers, or whether it's new residential buildings, some very, you know, the largest passive house tower in the world is coming. Like, it does take some time for this to hit the ground, but when it does, you will see, you know, I think a transformation of the downtown in a very positive way. So that all brings jobs, it all brings money, it brings new excitement. However, I understand at the current moment, it is a pretty desperate situation. So more money in the sanitation, making sure the police are, you know, changing their resources. Again, that's Chief Palmer's decision, but I know the police board is very gripped with this. And then trying to do everything we can while people hold on and we stick together through COVID. So we are always looking for new things, though. So any kind of any suggestions are always welcome. Things we haven't. You're the experts, right? I mean, the businesses are the experts on what they need. So I think about, you know, you said you wanted outdoor patios. We got that through really quickly. 400 up and running, now extended. You know, you said you needed more capacity for your liquor establishments. That's moving through. So really, tell us what you need and we'll do everything within our power to get it done, because we know how tough it is right now for everybody.
Well, be prepared for a lot of long memos.
I love new ideas. So looking forward.
Perfect. So being cognizant of the time, let's end on what I'd consider maybe a fun question, and one that's more up to you to structure as you want. What do you, and this kid did come in from one of our members as well, what do you feel are your most important accomplishments so far in your term as mayor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always of the mind that it's never you. It's just that you end up talking the most about these things, and often, bringing conversations to decision points. That's really a leadership. My staff kind of joke, they call me the decisionator. It's really to get things to a decision, and I think that's kind of the job as mayor. So I would say, in terms of accomplishments, I think how we've dealt with COVID-19 has been great. It was a totally unexpected challenge of massive proportions. And I know people, when you're in your business or in your house, you're thinking it's really stressful. But boy, when I talk to mayors around the world about how well our community has pulled together, and low case counts, still stressful, of course, how we've kept people alive, our fabulous health system and people staying apart, but also how the city's adjusted to a massive economic shock. I think at this point, bringing folks together and dealing that has been, I've only been in for 2 years, really, and so I feel very good about how we've done, and I'm sure there'll be lots of looks back about how we could do things better, but I think on balance, we've got, declaring a state of emergency early on, moving to virtual meetings, not stopping council, kind of facilitating all that's been good. The other half is, when I was elected, because of my experience in Ottawa, I knew I could start, I thought, accessing more housing funding, and landing about $500 million, I think it's been hard work, but it's been worthwhile. And what I think it's done is set up, success breeds success. And I think that now the federal government looks at Vancouver particularly as a place where they want to invest more money in housing, especially for the workforce, try new innovative programs, and that will put us in good shape for the long haul. So those two things I think are the two things I feel good about. But people ask me about legacies. It's something I don't care about. I don't ever think about that. It's nothing that's ever turned my crank as a politician or anything like that. I really think it's dealing with the problems in the moment and doing the best for the community you can. And that's so I feel like I've tried to do my best on that.
Well, on that note, Mayor Stewart, thank you very much. Let's conclude it there. And so we do appreciate your time and your insight and your willingness to engage with our members. It's important to us, the continued dialogue, obviously, between our business community and our elected officials is crucial in creating a shared understanding of the most pressing issues that we are facing these days, especially during the pandemic. So the DVBIA exists to provide a voice for our members and to foster relationships that will affect change inevitably. So thank you again for your time. That's it for today's program. Thank you to all of you who did tune in, and please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.